there's this link, this bit.ly link here, is bit.ly/pygothon2019. And the reason I put this image here, it's because maybe next time you see a door that says pull in it, you remember it's a pull request. So let's get started. I'm not sure if it's working. Let me click here. I don't think the switcher is working. I think firmware. Yeah, I'm gonna go for the keyboard. Yeah, it's okay. So as I was saying, this is me. I'm Luca. I'm a full stack developer. I have a master's in computer science. I work mainly with Django and React at Vinta. I was also this year's regional PyCon organizer in Brazil. Python Nordeste is the same shirt that I'm wearing right now. I'm really proud of it, so I just wanted to show off a bit. Vinta, where I work, is a software studio in Brazil. We work with consulting and development. We have clients in the United States. We have clients in New York and California. You might have seen our booth outside. We're giving free coffee, and if you want to talk about coffee or technology or Django and Python, anything, just reach out to us or go to vintasoftware.com. So let's start it. For the basics, I think probably most of you, or if not all of you, have already dealt with pull requests in a way or another. And you probably have some idea on how to do it, but there's always ways to improve it doing certain small things. I can always improve my own code management process as well. So there are some simple things that can take you a long way. It kind of lost the, come on, work with me here. Well, first of all, let's talk about why should we review code, right? So instead of asking me, let's ask the people. There's a survey called The Ultimate Guide to Code Reviews made by Codacy, which is quite a bold name, I would say, which interviewed 682 developers. They asked them a bunch of questions. One of them was, on average, what did they spend most of their time on? And their answers were that 51% of their time they spent on developing new features, and 46% of the time, which was the sum of the technical debt and the bug fixing, they spent not developing new features. So if you can go through a better pull request and code review, code management process, you're likely to shorten the time you spend on technical debt and bug fixing, so you have more time to develop new features and provide more value to your product. Another question they were asked was, what was the change in your development process that had the biggest impact to code quality? And although they did say a bunch of other things like tools and research and automation, the thing that stood out the most was code reviews. So even though there's the idea that usually developers don't like doing code review, which sometimes is true, they do acknowledge the fact that it's very important for the development process. Another question that they were asked was whether they did the code review before or after deploying the code to production, which I found was a bit of an odd question, but okay. So some people, like a small amount, do it after deploying to production. The largest amount does it before deploying to production. A small amount does both before and after, and I'll talk a bit about that later. And there's like a worrying amount that actually doesn't review code at all. And they're probably the ones responsible for this bug. I don't know if you were aware of it, the iOS calculator. You would try to sum up 1 + 2 + 3, and it would give you 24. There you go. Probably a bad code review management there. And they came to a shocking conclusion on that survey. They concluded that they found out that doing code reviews before the deployment, yeah, was far more beneficial than not doing code reviews at all. So yeah, mild shock, right? Who would guess that? Also, another conclusion that it came to was that doing code reviews both before and after the deployment had kind of the same effect as just doing it after. And that is because, according to their conclusions, when you're reviewing code that you know is going to be reviewed again after, you don't pay as much attention as you should be paying because you know someone else is going to look at that later. So now for some most common errors. Usually people say that code review is a chore, or they don't like to review code at all. Or I think the most common one is I'll just skip the code review due to the deadline. And although this might be very tempting to say, and I've said those myself, you got to remember that you're actually, while you're reviewing code, you're learning. You're learning more about the project that you work on. You're learning more about how to solve certain problems. You're learning more about the technology that you use. And like the best thing of all of that is that you're actually getting paid to learn. So you're reviewing code, doing work, you're getting paid to learn. So some best practices now, I'm gonna go through them a bit fast. They're like topified. So pull request templates is a great practice. We are, as human beings, we're lazy and our memory is error prone. So we must not rely on ourselves or our colleagues' memory to remember everything that we need to put into a pull request in order for the reviewer to have the correct amount of information to review that. On GitHub, you can just create a file called pull request template.markdown on the root of the project. On GitLab, you put any named file inside a GitLab folder, .gitlab, and on Bitbucket, you go through in that path, and you can find how to do it. Another good practice is to talk about repository and project configuration. So, for example, you can set up status checks in your repository so that you can prevent branches and pull requests from being merged unless they have passed some status checks. Like, for example, if you have a CI, a continuous integration server running your branches to make sure that the tests are passing, the linters are passing, everything else, and that the branch is not going to be merged until the CI has actually checked as okay. Some guideline files are also very interesting if you plan to have contributors to your project, which is usually the case. You're not usually not working by yourself in a big project. Having guidelines explains people how to contribute to your project. Also, setting approval or merge rules. You can define that, for example, on GitHub, if you write the codeowners.md file, you can define that some pull requests that involve that file can only be merged if a specific owner of that file has approved that pull request. And you have other kind of settings that you can do for the other repositories as well. Another great practice is using Gitflow. Gitflow is a consistent architecture that ensures that your branches are always up to date. So what that means is, for those of you who might not know it, you have this image here which shows the main branch, and all of the feature branches are going to branch off of that main branch. So you know that whenever you're developing a new feature, it is always coming from the most current code. And Gitflow also suggests that you create a separate branch for each feature. And that avoids having features on hold. What that means is maybe you are developing a specific feature, like a specific payment feature in your product, and somebody says, oh, we also wanted to maybe change the color of that pay button from blue to green. And you might be tempted to say, okay, I'm already doing this code around here, so I might as well just change the color. And then you do it, but the main feature you're working on gets a lot of comments in the pull request review, a lot of changes to be made, and this process goes back and forth, and it takes a while. And in the meantime, the color change for the button is on hold because you made it in the same pull request. You did not create a separate pull request for that. So remember that branches, they are cheap, and they bring great flexibility. So in that case, you should probably have made a separate branch, even if it's just a color change in a button, so it doesn't get on hold because the other feature is actually being reviewed. Another good practice is to try to keep the PR size as small as possible. As you can see right here in this image, we have a PR with 71 change files. So yeah, ain't nobody got time for that, right? Whoever is gonna review that code, it's probably gonna go through the files very quickly, because when you have like a PR that has 6 or 7 files, that's okay, you're gonna go through them very thoroughly. But if you have 71 files, you're probably just gonna go diagonally through them, and you might as well just like the review quality and time per section decreases, the time that you dedicate per section to review, and the shorter attention span usually allows for more bugs to pass. And now an analogy that I like to make with pull requests, and this is a tricky one, I actually need some input from you. If you look at these two pictures, the one with the full sink, the one with the empty sink, which one would you be more likely to leave a dirty dish in? Would it be the full sink or the empty sink? The full sink? Well, yeah. Thankfully, this time, somebody gave the answer that I was looking for. Like last time I gave this talk, somebody said the empty sink, and I was kind of like, okay, you just broke my flow. But, but yeah, I mean, the analogy here is that whenever you have like a queue of like 10 pull requests waiting for you to review, it's much more likely that if you get another pull request for you to review, you're just gonna say, oh, I already have 10, what's one more for me to review? So I'm just gonna leave it there and maybe someday I'll review those. So the idea is that you actually make a habit of dedicating maybe a few minutes a day to review PRs. And again, if you have like issues that are reasonably sized, they've been divided well in the sprint planning, you won't have PRs that are that big, so you'll be able to review them quickly. Also, another good practice is maybe define days of the week that you want to empty the queue, which means that, for example, you can say, oh, every Wednesday, no matter what, I'm just going to work on reviewing pull requests. It doesn't matter if all I do all day is reviewing pull requests, I'm going to empty the queue. Because you got to remember that the pull requests that are waiting to be reviewed are actually features for your product. So you're actually delaying the delivery of value to your product by not reviewing code. Another important thing for the developers themselves is to actually write clear commit messages. So instead of doing the first one, who just says fixes PR comments, try to be more like the second one, which is a quick paragraph, but does a brief explanation of what the changes were made. Remember to talk about how and not just what you did. Because if you ever want to go back in time or just look at the logs and understand when a certain change was made, you're going to have much more context to understand that. This here talks about positive and negative feedback. You might have seen this conversation already. This is an answer from Linus Torvalds towards a guy who made a pull request to the Linux kernel. And he was not the most polite person ever. The highlighted parts are just a bit of it. But you can find this on the internet, so I'm not going to go through it. But the thing to remember here is that there's a human being on the other side of the code review. And it's between quotation marks because it's actually the name of an article. It's a very interesting one if you want to check it out. Remember that also giving positive feedback doesn't mean to always agree. You can disagree through a positive feedback. It's important that you do it properly. And when you provide positive feedback, people feel more inclined to expose ideas. So they know that they won't be judged. And it also enforces the idea of the fail fast approach. So if someone has an idea and they're more inclined to expose their ideas, those ideas are going to get discussed and you're going to find out whether they're actually feasible or good for the project or not, and you're going to maybe throw away those ideas or actually focus on implementing them much sooner so you don't waste like a lot of time going after something that's probably going to like not work in the end and you just wasted time. So, and the last thing is like if you provide positive feedback, it perpetuates the positive behavior. So whoever receives that positive feedback is also going to give positive feedback. You got to remember that people, we are all humans here, and sometimes we are not on our best days, and sometimes getting certain comments, it's not the best thing ever. In the pull request process, there are different roles. You have the author or the requester role, and you have the reviewer role. So as the author, your role, your responsibility is to describe the issue, not just point to the card or ticket. So for example, many times we'll just create a pull request and say, this fixes issue 3244. And the person who is reviewing the pull request is actually going to have to go through, to click on the link, read the description, maybe read some conversation that happened afterwards, understand what happened. Maybe the acceptance criteria has changed in the conversation. And if the person doesn't read it right, he or she might actually not know that the acceptance criteria has changed and may actually refuse the pull request from being merged. And it's going to delay it more and more because you were not clear in creating your pull request. So write just a simple paragraph explaining what was the issue, what did you do to change it, and that makes everyone's lives easier. As a reviewer, remember to ask questions and not just make demands. So instead of just saying, fix that, try to say, like, shouldn't it be like this? Or instead of just saying, why is this variable doing nothing? Maybe put it like, I don't see this variable being used. Maybe it could be removed. Because sometimes we as reviewers might have the tendency to think, oh, I know how this code works, I know what this is doing, but sometimes we don't have the full context or we don't have the mindset that the person had at the time that she was writing it. So we give him or her the possibility of explaining what was the thought process to get there. So remember that you're not a linter. You're not a linter to give imperative instructions, nor you're talking to an AI assistant. You're a human being talking to another one. So sometimes we get caught up in development and interacting with the machine all day long that we kind of forget that we're actually talking to other people as well. Another great practice here is to have a minimum of X approvals. Of course, it depends on the team size. So the idea here is that at least X people review your code and approve it. It avoids scenarios like I review yours, you review mine. So it ends up like, okay, let's just accept my PR, I'll accept yours, and we don't talk about this. There's a real life example here. I used to work for a company that had geographically separated teams. And for some reason, the folks in the other team would sometimes review their own pull requests, and their code would arrive for us, sometimes with bugs. And we would not understand. I don't know if their review process was like not so thorough, or maybe they did the I review yours, you review mine thing. I don't know, but not only it can lead to more bugs in your code, but it also breaks the team unity. So it's nice to have more people reviewing the code. It also ensures that at least X plus 1 people know the code. So 1 being the person who actually wrote the code, and X being the number of people who actually reviewed the code. So if, for example, the person who wrote the code is on a sick day leave, someone else has enough knowledge on that code to actually fix some bug, some emergency bug that happened. Atlassian suggests that at least you assign at least 1.5 or 2.5 times the number of people that are actually required to review. So if you need like a minimum of 2 approvals for a pull request, you assign 3 to 5 people to the pull request, so that maybe sometimes some people are very busy, they don't have time to review it, but you have more people assigned, so whoever is free is going to review that faster. Remember to also add screenshots whenever you're doing UI or UX changes. The cliche says it, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Maybe sometimes some changes are not obvious, like you've changed like the positioning of something, the alignment, and it's easier if you just show a picture of the before and after or something like that. Using git blame is also an awesome tip. Usually we use git blame to find out who screwed up in a certain part of the code. But here the idea is actually to finding out who to assign for a certain issue. So maybe you're developing a feature, you're new to the code base or something, you don't know exactly who to assign to review your pull request. Use git blame and you'll find out who was the person who did the most change to that file. Probably that person is the one you should assign to be the reviewer of your pull request. Let the automation tools do the nitpicky observations. So don't be that person who goes through the pull request saying you forgot the semicolon here, you're writing camel case instead of snake case, you're doing this and that, like use linters for that. They're a great tool for that, and whatever else you can do to avoid being the person who does that. Remember to always teach, just don't just tell. So whenever you're saying that you think something is wrong in the code, teach the person why that's wrong, because otherwise he or she are just gonna continue doing the error in the future, because they're not gonna be aware of why that was wrong. And when something breaks, share the fault. So remember that the person who wrote the code wrote something that broke, but the code also went through your eyes, you review it, so it's kind of your fault as well. You let it pass, and the person who wrote the code is already under pressure for being the one guilty, so to speak, for having done the mistake. So share the fault. Now some quick tips. For GitHub, you can write keywords on your pull request. Like for example, if you write close #3244, whenever that pull request is merged, the issue that's pointed there is actually going to be closed as well. So you don't need to worry about cleaning your issues tab. You can also have permalinks to code snippets, so it's easier to refer to them whenever you're talking to someone. There are some tools like Octohint, Refined Bitbucket, and Refined GitHub. They're browser extensions that allow for syntax highlighting, amongst other things, that help you in the code review process when you're looking at the repository page. Review apps and deploy previews are tools respectively from Heroku and Netlify that allow you to run your branch in a public URL. So the person that's reviewing it doesn't need to actually download the code and run it in their machine. They can just access a public URL and you'll see your product as if the changes in that branch had already been deployed to production. So you can view it live and review it there. And finally, use linters, as I've mentioned. If you access this presentation, there's a link here in the linters for a talk from Flavio Juvenal about linters. It's a very great talk, so just feel free to watch it. Some insights from Vinta that we had along throughout time. Remember to always warn on Slack whenever you're done with your interaction in the pull request. So whether you're reviewing it or you're fixing the comments that someone left for you, remember to always warn on Slack or whatever chatting tool you use. Because if you just rely on repository and email notifications, sometimes people just check emails like once or twice a day, so you're going to delay the whole development process. Sometimes it's a very urgent change, so don't just rely on those. Remember to always test first and review later. What that means is actually do the QA first, so you can find out if the feature is actually working. Sometimes the feature is not working, and if you start reviewing the code first, then you're going to check if the feature is working, and you find it's not working, the person is going to have to do changes in the code. So it's not like you're just going to waste time reviewing the code. So test first and review the code later. And finally, some real-world examples. These are pull requests to the Django project repository. Here we have someone who submitted a change, and the reviewer said, this pull request is full of merge conflicts. Please, can you resolve this first? So he's very polite on his asking. And the person said, I'm working on it. Sorry, I'm new to this. How do I find out these conflicts? How do I solve them? And the reviewer is very kind to say some stuff that for some of us who are used to pull requests, it's a very basic thing, but he pointed out where he could find the symbols that describe that this is the region that's conflicting with something else, and teaching the person how to do it instead of just saying, oh, this is wrong, do it right. Another example here is the reviewer for another pull request is actually saying the author of the pull request is having some trouble with it, and the reviewer is saying, oh, in Python 2 this could be something, but in Python 3 that's not the case, so maybe the issue is somewhere else. So it's actually teaching what could be wrong, what could be the problem. Also, another reviewer here is talking about following the guideline files for someone who's creating a pull request. So that's why it's important to have a guidelines file as well if you want people to collaborate, contribute with your project. And finally, we have someone explaining that the person who created a pull request should write tests for the changes they made, and the person doesn't know exactly where to write the test. So first, the reviewers point the specific place where the test should live, because as a contributor, you're not expected to know where things are in someone else's project. And also, here the reviewer asks the author whether he means a certain thing in a certain part of the code. So instead of just saying this is wrong, this should be like this, he actually asks the person what the person wanted to do there. And it gives the person the opportunity to explain what was his or her thought regarding that. So the person actually disagrees with that and explains what was the thought behind it. And finally, one more thing here. We at Vinta, we like checklists very much. And we've created a checklist for pull requests. It's a checklist that you can, it's not something you're gonna go through every single day, but it's a good checklist for you to create your repository settings, and maybe every once in a while go there. It's an open source, free to use and share checklist. So if you have any contribution that I think should be added there, any typos or anything, just feel free to create a pull request to that checklist. And well, that's it. Thank you. Don't know if I have time for questions, but.
Yeah, we've got time for a few questions. Hello, check. Anyone want to share a error they made or something they ran into during the pull request cycle? Okay.
Hello. Hi. I had a question in terms of like, sometimes you go through multiple iterations of this, and sometimes some people go through, like, I made a change, something's wrong, something gets abandoned, like doesn't get merged back. It's like, as a contributor or maintainer, you're like, hey, maybe you could like do this thing. Hey, are you still there? Are you still alive? And it's like, at some point, what's your suggestion in terms of like merging the code contribution, right?
You mean like,
at that point, like, or like when things kind of drag on, or things that you find like you could do it. You know what I mean?
Well, depending on what's the issue itself, I think maybe you could try to, if that's something, that's a change that you're really interested, as the owner of the repository, for example, if that's a change you're really interested in adding to your repository, maybe you can, but you don't have the time for it, you can maybe try to ping the person and point her more to the exact place where the change should be made, or explain a bit like more thoroughly how the change should be done, because sometimes everybody is on a busy schedule, right? Nobody has enough time to do all the stuff that they want to do. So sometimes it's a thing that the person feels like they want to contribute, but they don't exactly know how, and they had this idea and they don't quite understand the code. So what's missing for them is like just that little push that points them in the right direction. Maybe they're understanding it wrong, so maybe being a little more thorough if that's something you really want for your project. I don't know if, it's a hard thing to actually solve, because it depends on a number of factors. It could be anything else, but I think that's one way of going through it.
Okay, one more, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Okay, this is to follow up your early question about PR should be very short. I've noticed that works for errors, but for features, at least where I work, we have this habit of somebody's going to do a nice big feature, they work at it for many iterations, and then this massive pull request containing 50 files shows up. And because they're all related to each other, it's very hard to break up. How do you handle those situations?
Well, I think there are always going to be situations where you're going to have to make an exception and work on a huge PR. But I think the idea is that while you're developing it, you as a developer got to have the sense, and that comes with experience, that comes with work, to see, well, this is going to get a bit bigger than I was expecting. This is going to touch a lot more files than I was expecting. So maybe I can put these files that I know I'm not going to touch anymore to be reviewed, even though the feature itself is not able to be QA'd, but I'm just going to do a pull request for these specific files that I'm already done with them. And so that when the QA time comes, the actual amount of files that need to be reviewed is much smaller. But that's something you got to be always watching for. It's not something you can do once you're finished, because once you're finished, you already have the 55 files changed. So sometimes you're going to have to go through it, but the idea is to try to set the approach of always be thinking about how is this going to turn out? Is this going to be a huge PR that nobody's going to want to review? I want this feature to be done sooner. As a developer, you're also responsible. You're actually the main person responsible for making sure that the feature is going to be delivered on time. So whatever you can do to make the feature be reviewed faster, it's up to you as well. As a developer, it's your responsibility. So it's kind of a shared thing.
Okay, let's hear it for Luca.